Welcome back to Afro Asia Diaries. Before we start, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Let's begin. They handed her a cardboard box instead of an apology. Amara Okafor stood in the marble lobby of Kong Innovations, her badge already confiscated, her name already whispered like a mistake the company was correcting. 6 weeks of proving herself, erased in one meeting she wasn't even given the chance to defend herself in. Nobody in that building knew her real name. Nobody cared to ask. The elevator doors opened. And the most powerful man in South Korean tech walked out. The same man who had barely looked at her in 6 weeks. The same man everyone in that room answered to without question. His eyes went straight to the box in her arms. "You fired my intern," he said, voice cold enough to freeze the whole lobby, "without asking me?" Then he turned to Amara and said the words that would change everything. "And more importantly, that's my wife." The room froze. But to understand how they got here, to understand why a man like Kang Minjun would say those words in front of a lobby full of people who'd spent 6 weeks looking straight through her, we have to go back. Back to a cold morning outside Incheon Airport, 3 weeks into a new country, when Amara Okafor still believed she was completely alone. She had exactly 14,000 won left in her wallet and a plane ticket she couldn't afford to use. She stood outside the airport that first week in Seoul, watching her breath turn to fog, wondering if coming here had been a mistake. Lagos never got this cold. Lagos never made her feel this small. The scholarship letter was still folded in her bag, soft at the creases from how many times she'd read it. "Congratulations, Miss Okafor. You have been selected for the 6-month business internship at Kong Innovations, Seoul." It had felt like the beginning of everything. Now 3 days in, it just felt like she was drowning in a language she barely understood, in a city that looked right through her. She almost didn't notice the old woman. Almost. The woman was small, wrapped in a gray wool coat too thin for the weather, standing at a bus stop kiosk pleading with a man in a cheap suit who kept sliding papers toward her, tapping a pen against them like he was running out of patience on purpose. Amara didn't understand the Korean. But she understood fear. She'd seen it on her own grandmother's face once years ago, when men came to the house asking about a debt that wasn't even hers. She understood a scam when she saw one dressed up as help. "Ma'am." Amara stepped in before she could think better of it. "Don't sign that." The man in the suit turned, annoyed. The old woman looked up, startled, her eyes wet and confused. "I don't know what he's telling you," Amara said, crouching to her eye level. "But nobody who's really trying to help you rushes you like this. Whatever it is, it can wait." The man snapped something in Korean, gathering his papers fast, the way guilty people move, and disappeared into the crowd. It was just the two of them now. "Why," the old woman said in slow, careful English, "would you help a stranger?" "Because somebody should have," Amara said simply. The old woman studied her for a long moment, then took Amara's hand in both of hers, her grip stronger than her frail body suggested. "What is your name, child?" "Amara." "Amara." The old woman repeated it slowly like she was memorizing it. "You will not remember this day the way I will remember it." Amara laughed a little, awkward, unsure what to do with that. "It's really nothing, ma'am. I'm just glad you're okay." But the old woman didn't laugh back. She just held onto Amara's hand a second longer, her eyes suddenly sharp, suddenly knowing, like she'd already seen something coming that Amara couldn't. "No," she said quietly. "It is something. You will see." Amara didn't think about that sentence again for 6 days. Not until her visa office called with the words that made her stomach drop straight through the floor. Processing error, immediate risk of deportation. And not until a black car she didn't recognize pulled up outside her apartment, and a driver stepped out holding a door open, saying a name she didn't expect to ever hear directed at her. "Mrs. Kong." Amara stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the driver like he'd spoken in a language she didn't know, even though the words were plain English. "I think you have the wrong person," she said. "Miss Amara Okafor?" the driver asked, checking a small tablet in his hand. "Yes, but..." "Then I have the right person." He gestured toward the open door, patient, unbothered, like this happened every day. "Madame Kong is waiting for you." He almost said no. Everything in her wanted to say no, to turn around and go back upstairs to her cramped studio apartment and pretend her visa wasn't about to collapse underneath her like wet paper. But she thought of her mother back in Lagos, saving for years to help her get here, and she thought of the shame of going home after 3 weeks with nothing to show for it but a stamped deportation notice. So she got in the car. The old woman from the bus stop was sitting inside, except now she didn't look small or frightened. She looked like she owned the air around her, dressed in soft cream silk, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching Amara with the same knowing eyes from before. "You," Amara breathed. "Me," the old woman agreed, almost amused. "My name is Kang Sujin. I did not lie to you that day, Amara. I told you that you would see." "See what, exactly?" Sujin didn't answer right away. She reached into her handbag and slid a folder across the seat, and Amara opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside was her visa file. The real one, the broken one, stamped with a correction order, and beneath it, a document with her name typed next to a man's she had never met. Kang Minjun. "A marriage license," Amara said very quietly, like saying it too loud might make it more real. "A temporary one," Sujin corrected. "On paper only. My grandson does not know sentiment, Amara. But he knows obligation, and I am calling one in. You will not be deported. You will keep your internship. And in return you give my family your discretion. Nothing more." "Your grandson agreed to this?" Something flickered across Sujin's face. Not quite a smile, not quite worry. "He will." Amara wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, wanted to ask what kind of man simply agrees to marry a stranger because his grandmother asked. But the fear of going home with nothing was louder than her disbelief, and before she could talk herself out of it, she was signing her name beside a stranger's. She didn't meet Kang Minjun until 4 days later, in a boardroom she wasn't supposed to be in. He walked in without looking at anyone, tall, unbothered, a man built entirely out of straight lines and silence, and the room seemed to physically lower its volume around him. Amara had expected cold. She hadn't expected the way her chest tightened when his eyes finally landed on her. Not unkind exactly, just assessing, like he was recalculating something he hadn't planned for. "So you're the intern my grandmother married me to," he said in flawless English, no greeting attached to it. "So you're the CO who didn't say no," Amara shot back before she could stop herself. For a second something almost human passed over his face. "Almost. Discretion, Miss Okafor," he said, turning to leave. "That's all I ask." "It's Mrs. Kang now apparently," she said to his back. He paused at the door. Didn't turn around. But she saw his shoulders shift just slightly, like the words had landed somewhere he wasn't expecting. "Apparently," he agreed and walked out. Amara stood there a long moment, her heart doing something complicated and unwelcome, wondering exactly what she had signed herself into. 6 weeks passed and nothing about the marriage felt real except the ring Amara wore only during company events, tucked into her coat pocket the rest of the time like a secret she was ashamed and strangely protective of. Minjun kept his distance the way he kept everything. Precise, controlled, unreadable. They shared no home. They shared no meals. The only proof of their arrangement was a single dinner a month with Sujin, where he sat across from Amara and spoke to her like a colleague, polite and empty, while his grandmother watched them both with the patient, knowing eyes of someone waiting for a storm she could already smell coming. At work none of that mattered. At work Amara was just the intern. The foreign girl, she heard them call her in the break room in the hallways, not even bothering to lower their voices because they assumed she didn't understand enough Korean to catch it. She understood more than they thought. She understood every syllable of "she only got the internship because of diversity quotas," every whispered "doesn't she know she doesn't belong here." Her direct manager, a sharp-tongued woman named Han Jiun, made it her personal mission to remind Amara of her place. Every report Amara submitted came back marked with red ink for things that weren't wrong, just different. Every idea she raised in meetings got repeated 5 minutes later by someone else and suddenly became brilliant. Amara swallowed all of it. She had learned a long time ago that surviving somewhere that didn't want you required a particular kind of silence. Not weakness, just strategy. She told herself she was here for the internship, for the experience, For the version of her future that this opportunity was supposed to build. Not for a fake husband who barely looked at her outside of dinners neither of them wanted to be at. But some nights, alone in her small apartment, she caught herself thinking about the way his shoulders had shifted that first day. About the strange, unwanted warmth that crawled up her neck whenever he said her name. Her real name, not Miss Okafor, just Amara. The one time it had slipped out of him in the elevator, quiet, almost like he hadn't meant to say it. She hated that she thought about it. She hated more that she wanted him to say it again. Then came the leak. Confidential product designs from Kong Innovation's upcoming release showed up on a rival company's desk 2 weeks before launch. And by the time the panic reached the executive floor, someone had already decided who to blame. The badge logs show her account accessed the files at 11:47 p.m., Han Jun said, sliding a printed report across the table in front of the department director, her voice thick with false regret. I hate to say it, but the intern had access. And the intern has outside connections we don't fully understand. Amara sat in that meeting feeling the walls close and slow, the way water rises in a room before you realize you're already drowning. I was home at 11:47, she said. I have never even opened that folder. The logs don't lie, Miss Okafor, the director said, not looking at her. She looked around the table for anyone who might pause long enough to ask a real question. No one did. It was easier to believe the foreign girl than to question a system that had already decided. By the time security walked her out of the building 2 hours later, her badge confiscated, her belongings in a cardboard box against her chest, Amara wasn't crying. He was too numb to cry. She just kept thinking about her mother in Lagos, about the money already spent, about how she was going to explain this. The elevator doors opened. And Kang Minjun stepped out of it, straight into the middle of her humiliation. For one full second nobody in the lobby moved. Minjun's eyes went first to the cardboard box in Amara's arms. Then to the security guard's hand resting near her elbow, guiding her like she was something dangerous. Then slowly, terribly, to Han Jun standing by the front desk with her arms crossed and a look of quiet satisfaction still fresh on her face. Explain, Minjun said. Just that. One word, low enough that the temperature of the entire lobby seemed to drop with it. The HR director stumbled forward, already talking too fast. Sir, there was a security breach. The intern's badge accessed confidential files after hours. We followed protocol. Termination was. I didn't ask what protocol you followed. Minjun's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. I asked you to explain why you fired my intern without asking me first. The word "my" landed strange in the room, and Amara watched confusion ripple across every face that had spent 6 weeks looking through her like glass. The director blinked. Sir, she was assigned to the marketing division, not directly under your. She is under me. Minjun crossed the lobby now, each step unhurried, deliberate, and for the first time since Amara had met him, there was nothing controlled about the look on his face. There was fury sitting right beneath the surface, barely leashed. He stopped in front of her, and something in his eyes softened for just a breath, just for her, before hardening again as he turned back to the room. And more importantly, he said, loud enough now that it carried to every corner of the lobby, that's my wife. The silence that followed had weight. Amara felt it press against her ribs. Your, Han Jun's voice cracked on the word. Wife. Kang Amara, he said, and it was the first time Amara had heard her name said that way, his family name pressed against hers like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. You accused my wife of a data leak based on badge logs you didn't verify, fired her without my authorization, and humiliated her in front of the entire department. I want to know who signed off on this. Nobody answered. Han Jun's face had gone the color of old paper. Sir, the director tried again. If we had known. That's the problem, Minjun cut in, quiet again now, which was somehow worse than the shouting would have been. You didn't need to know who she was to treat her like a human being. You only stopped disrespecting her the moment you were afraid of me. Amara stood there holding her cardboard box, feeling something crack open in her chest that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with the strange, unbearable relief of being seen. Really seen, after 6 weeks of being looked past. Minjun turned to her then, and his voice dropped low enough that it felt like it belonged only to the two of them, even with the whole lobby watching. I should have told them sooner, he said. I let you carry this alone. That was wrong of me. You didn't have to do any of this, Amara said, her voice unsteady, her throat tight. The marriage was supposed to be on paper. Discretion, remember? Something shifted in his face, something careful and unguarded at once. He stepped closer, close enough that she caught the same quiet cologne from the boardroom weeks ago, close enough that the box between them suddenly felt like the only thing keeping a distance neither of them was sure they wanted anymore. Discretion was my grandmother's condition, he said quietly. Not mine. I think I stopped wanting distance from you a while ago, Amara. I just didn't know how to say it without breaking the rules we agreed to. Her heart was pounding so loud she was certain he could hear it in the silence of that lobby. Minjun, she whispered, his name unfamiliar and warm in her mouth for the first time. He reached out, slow, giving her every chance to step back, and gently took the box from her arms, setting it down on the reception desk like it meant nothing at all. Come back upstairs, he said. Let them watch you walk back in on your own terms this time. The walk back to the elevator felt longer than the walk out of it ever had. Every eye in the lobby followed them, Han Jiun frozen by the desk, the director still stammering apologies to no one in particular, the security guard quietly setting Amara's box back into her hands like it was something fragile now instead of something disposable. Amara kept her chin up the whole way, the way her mother taught her to walk into rooms that didn't want her, except this time she wasn't walking in alone. Minjun didn't let go of her hand until the elevator doors closed. The second they did, the silence between them changed. It wasn't the careful, distant silence of 6 weeks of dinners neither of them had wanted. It was something else. Thick, charged, the kind of silence that makes a person aware of their own heartbeat. You didn't have to say it like that, Amara said softly, staring at the numbers climbing above the door instead of at him, because looking at him felt dangerous right now. In front of everyone. I know. His voice was low. I wanted to. She finally looked at him, and he was already looking at her, and there was nothing cold in his eyes anymore, nothing calculated. Just something raw he'd clearly been keeping folded up small for a long time. For 6 weeks, he said, I told myself distance was safer. For you. For the arrangement. For my grandmother's plan. He exhaled like the next part cost him something. I was wrong. Watching them carry your things out in a box. I have never wanted to burn a building down before, Amara. Today I understood what that felt like. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. Minjun. I'm not finished. He stepped closer, and the small space of the elevator felt smaller still. The air between them warmed despite the cold marble at their backs. This started as paper. A favor to my grandmother. A way to keep you safe. I told myself that's all it was, even when I found reasons to walk past marketing more than I needed to. Even when I said your name in an elevator and couldn't stop thinking about how it sounded. You remember that, she whispered. I remember everything, he said. I just didn't know what to do with any of it. The elevator slowed. Neither of them reached for the box between them anymore. It sat forgotten on the floor. Amara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it in the inch of space left between their bodies, and when his hand came up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face, she didn't pull away, she leaned in just slightly, just enough. Tell me to stop, he murmured, his forehead nearly resting against hers, and I will. She didn't tell him to stop. His hand slid to her jaw, careful, like she was something he was still afraid of breaking, and when his lips finally met hers, it wasn't rushed or hungry the way she might have imagined from a man who ran an empire with a single word. It was slow. Deliberate. Like he was memorizing her the way his grandmother had memorized her name that first cold morning at the bus stop. Like he already knew this wouldn't be the only time. The elevator doors opened on their floor and neither of them moved right away. Somewhere down the hallway, Han Jiun's name was already being whispered by someone else entirely. But for one more second none of that existed. There was only Amara and Minjun, and a marriage that had stopped being paper the moment he chose her in front of everyone who never thought she mattered. And that's the end of this one Afro Asia Diaries family. Tell me, did you feel that elevator scene? Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if Amara and Minjun's story lived rent-free in your heart tonight. And I'll see you in the next one.